Welcome to the Shout Out Loud Careers series. I'm Janie, a young producer, and today I'm going to be interviewing Jack.
Hi everyone, my name's Jack Shoulder. I'm one of the learning managers with English Heritage, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today.
I'm very excited to be learning a bit about what you do.
Wonderful stuff. Yeah, so I work in learning, which has a really broad remit. It's everything from researching to writing content to thinking about how schools and young people interact with our sites and how they can really learn all the juicy details about the history of what we do and how we can think about those in all sorts of ways. So sometimes we're thinking about how we can think about science at, for example, Osborne in the Isle of Wight, using the grounds and the gardens there. Sometimes we're thinking about physical activity. So over in Audley End, where there was a military training in the gardens, we're thinking, okay, let's do some PE in there as well, so we can really think about how people had used the space. So in learning, we think about history a lot because it's English heritage. We think about history, but we also think of other ways of doing that, think about those things. So it's a lot of creative thinking that goes into this, into my kind of role.
Brilliant, thanks. So, what does a typical day of work look like for you?
Oh, good question. Well, typical day of work usually involves checking emails, because I have to be in touch with lots of different people about lots of different project meetings with colleagues, to talk about how we're approaching things. Sometimes it's meetings with site team, a few hours of research and writing in there as well. Sometimes it's off to the library to find some books. Sometimes research is talking to the historians and the curators. Sometimes research is a little bit more desk-based or just using the books. It's hard to nail down what a typical day might look like because sometimes there's going out to sites always feels like an adventure, especially if it's somewhere that I haven't been before. And with 420 odd properties that English Heritage looks after, we get to travel like all over England, visiting new places. So when it's a site visit day, oh, very exciting.
Wow. Is there a particular part of your job that you like the most?
That's a really good question. I think the things that I enjoy the most, finding those juicy bits of history, and it's not just like the dramatic or the gory, but those fun facts that really kind of stick with you, and being able to kind of like communicate the enthusiasm for those facts, those stories. It's usually where site visits are magical. I also find a lot of joy in developing activities to help school groups really get the most out of coming to that site. Because I remember like school trips when I was at school were a big deal. It's like, oh, what are we going to find? What are we going to discover? And I want to kind of give today's kids those opportunities to have a really interesting educational experience. So being able to think creatively is a big part of the joy in my work.
Kind of moving on to talking a little bit about how you've got here. So, was this your first job at English Heritage?
This is my first role with English Heritage, but before joining this role, I've been working in the museum sector since 2010. I started off volunteering at the Cartoon Museum in London, and also with an organisation called Kids in Museums, which focuses on helping museums be more family friendly. I always knew that I wanted to work with kids, work in education. I didn't want to be a teacher in a classroom. I am very much about sharing facts, sharing things that I'm enthusiastic about, all of those things. I felt like teaching didn't quite fit, but this working museum education fit with my personality, fitted with what I wanted to do. So I started volunteering at the Cartoon Museum and Kids in Museums, and at the same time working at my local children's centre. So I was doing lots of admin stuff there, working with vulnerable families, and at Kids in Museums working with museums to be more family friendly. And at the Cartoon Museum, I was getting some on the ground experience in a museum setting. And from there, I moved into a paid role at the British Museum. So I was there for a long time. I worked on family activities. From there, I moved into other roles in their Digital Discovery Centre. that was doing a similar kind of role. That was writing sessions, delivering sessions with a digital aspect to them. So using technology to get the most out of the museum's collection. Beside that, I've never had just one job at a time. It's always been multiples because the heritage sector is not the best paying sector ever. So while I was working at the British Museum, I was also working at Culture 24. That's a digital agency that was based down in Brighton. And with them, I was working on web content for various things. So at one point, it was listings for events during the Olympics and the Cultural Olympiad back in 2012. I'm feeling ancient going forward. And I also worked on an educational project for them, a website called show.me.uk, which worked with museum collections and really presented those collections to school kids and teachers to help them with homework, help them with research projects. And my work there really helped me develop the skills that I needed for what I'm doing now as a learning manager at English Heritage. So after Culture 24, I was still with the British Museum, but then I started working at Town Art Gallery in Eastbourne, where I started as a learning assistant, then moved into learning coordinator post, and then by the time I left, I was acting head of learning. So I had a real career arc with them, and that was working across audiences. So early years, schools, secondary schools, A levels, adults, elderly people as well, like the whole gamut, family stuff, community stuff. And there was a lot of practical skills like getting rooms set up, as well as developing a program, thinking what are we going to do at various times of year. And because the gallery there was a permanent collection, but there was also a rotating exhibition display, it was also thinking, how can we develop an educational offer around these ever-changing exhibitions? And the thing I'm most proud of working at Towner was getting involved in the local pride. So we were present in the marches and also at the celebration afterwards. We always put on free family craft activities. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that families would come over to us and be like, oh, it's so good that there's something free for everyone to do together. Actually, alongside all of that, I also volunteer at the V&A because I don't have enough on my plate. And at the V&A, I deliver LGBTQ tours of the exhibition. So I get to shine a light on the queer histories and the queer stories that are often overlooked, under researched, not mentioned, but being able to share those with audiences of all ages. So I've done a lot before joining English Heritage, and even since joining English Heritage, I've still kept up the work with kids in museums and kept work with V&A as well, because I feel like those are really, really important brands.
Awesome to hear just everything that you've been able to do.
Yeah.
Especially the tours at the V&A. That's really interesting. You've covered so much that I'm like, right, what do I have left to ask in this part? It's brilliant. Do you feel that some of the work that you might have done at A level or in university kind of helped set up your career, or is there anything that you found particularly useful, kind of introducing you to the heritage sector?
Good question. So at A levels, I took history, classical civilizations, and English. It's very much an arts and humanities kind of person. It gave me a good sense of art history as well, particularly through classics. Really helped, particularly when working at the gallery, when working at the British Museum, when working at the V&A. And then for my undergrad, I did classics with English. Those research skills that come from doing those really rigorous subjects, as well as being able to explore things both as material culture, because classics involves a lot of going to museums, seeing sculptures, seeing vases, things like that, as well as more everyday objects. And then through English Lit is looking at text-based sources, thinking, okay, what does this tell us about, characters, individuals, peoples? What can we learn about the writer from their writings? those kind of research skills and being able to look between the lines to find information to get a sense of people in the past, that's coming really handy. One key thing that no one tells you about when you're going into a career in heritage is like learn how to use Excel. Like get really, really good at Excel because that will help you track your numbers, so your key performance indicators, so how many people have attended various programs, which comes in really handy for evaluation, which is also a big, big thing in learning. That also helps with project management. So you can set up a nice little chart and say, this is going to happen at this date, and you can see where everything kind of tracks. I think one of the key things with learning in particular is to be a successful educator, you need to be a good communicator. And that is something you can practice, but again, it's not something that you pick up in school per se, unless you've got a teacher who's very, very keen on presentations, which isn't always the case. So being able to be a effective, effusive, enthusiastic communicator has been a real skill that I've had to learn how to develop. I mean, it's always helped that in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to be a Blue Peter presenter. So this is my way of fulfilling that dream.
Is there anything that you're currently working towards in either your career or your current job? Is there anything that you're wanting to push more of, or just an overarching goal that you might have?
Share more inclusive histories. So whether that is sharing more LGBTQ related histories or histories of people of color relating to our sites, or more generally, I really want to push for more of that, because I feel like that tells a much richer history of our sites and a much more honest history of what went on in the past.
I'd like to ask you if there's anything that you would say or give as advice to maybe a 16, 17-year-old who would love to have a job like yours.
Cool. I've got some key pieces of advice. I've been thinking about this. So the obvious one, which isn't something everyone can do, is if volunteer, get some experience if you can. I realize that not everyone is in a position where they can do that. But if you are in a position where you can volunteer, if you've got some time, do it. It looks really good on your CV, and you develop skills. If it's a good volunteering opportunity, you will get it out as much as you put in. So it's all about focusing on those skills and how you can develop them. I would also advise, if you say you're really interested in art or really interested in history, demonstrate that somehow. So while I was in the early stages of my career, I started a blog. So I was writing about museums and exhibitions I visited, and that became a really good way for me to demonstrate in job interviews that I really care about museums. And one key bit of advice when you get to the applying for job stage is read the job description, read the person criteria, and make sure you answer what they're looking for. When I first started applying for jobs, I didn't have anyone give me that advice. And I was writing lovely prose about how I'm, really excited about this opportunity and how I would really like to work for them. And then when someone said, okay, this is the person spec, this is what they want to know, these are the skills they're looking for, answer them. It's like, oh, okay. And then I started having much more success with my job applications. And one final bit of advice for anyone thinking of embarking a career in anything, the best bit of advice I've ever got is think of career as a verb rather than a noun. It's not a set case of you do this job, then it progresses, and it progresses. Because life doesn't work like that. You're moving from one thing to another. You'll be doing all sorts of roles, sometimes because of necessity, and sometimes that's just because of the route life takes. So if you think, oh yeah, in 10 years, I'm going to be running everything. And if it turns out in 10 years' time, you're not, it's like, don't sweat it. Your career just took a slightly different path. Or if it takes you slightly longer to get started in your dream role, because you might find something that suits you even better. So yeah, think of career as the verb rather than the noun. It takes a lot of that stress away.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been really interesting. And Thank you very much for watching and hope you join us in the next video.